Hello, welcome back to another episode of the National Hispanic Coalition for Aviation Excellence Career Series podcast. I'm Freddy La Sala, your host. Today, we're highlighting the journey of an aviation professional whose career spans military service, air traffic control, and leadership within the aviation workforce. Today, joining us is Ariel Ortega, certified professional controller with the Federal Aviation Administration and a former United States Marine Corps air traffic control specialist. Ariel worked at several FAA facilities, including Evansville, Indiana, Columbus, Georgia, and now at Prescott, Arizona. Thank you for joining us today, Ariel.
Thank you for having me.
Can you start by telling us about your background and what first sparked your interest in aviation and air traffic control?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I had no idea about aviation. I knew I wanted to do something in the military, and I always joke that I wanted to be a Power Ranger, and the Marine Corps is the closest I can get. So I was just really motivated to join the Marines, and honestly, I lucked out into air traffic. I overheard a conversation. Someone, like I said, wasn't even talking to me, and I heard them say air traffic control was a good job in the civilian world. So when it took a lot of convincing, but I got my mom to sign for me, and I joined before my senior year at 17. And so all I had to do was complete my senior year and ship to boot camp. So when the recruiter asked me, he was like, "What job do you want to do?" I was like, "I don't know, air traffic control. I just wanted to be a Marine." So he was like, "What's that?" I was like, "I don't know. I heard it's a good job afterwards." And so me and him both looked into it, and he was like, "Oh, wow, this is a really good job," So after I completed high school, I went to boot camp, then on to my MOS school, which was in Pensacola, Florida. And I was a little bit overwhelmed at first. There was a lot of schoolwork, and I have a twin sister. She went to college when I joined the Marines, and I had more homework than she did in
Oh,
the Marine
wow.
Corps. But yeah, I ended up completing school there. My first duty station was Camp Pendleton, California. And that's where I was like, oh, I really actually enjoy this. It was a lot of thinking. It was a lot of problem solving and problem preventing. After that, I went on to Okinawa, Japan. I was there for 2.5 years. And then I got out in 2000, applied for the FAA, and I got hired on in November of 2015. And as you stated, I've started my career in Evansville, Indiana. I was there for about 3 years and then transferred to Columbus, Georgia. I was there for about 4, and I finally made it back to Arizona um, in July of 23. Born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. So, Prescott's about an hour and a half away, so it's nice to be home.
Nice, nice. And you mentioned MOS. That's just the name of each career has an MOS, right?
Yes. MOS stands for Military Occupational Specialty.
Okay.
So it's your job assignment in the military. And you request something and they might assign you something else. But so for me, being for as early as I enlisted, I kind of had my first pick. So when I met other people in the schoolhouse in Pensacola and they knew about, I was like, "How did you guys know about ATC?" And they're like, "Oh, you
Hmm.
didn't know?" I was like, "No, I've never heard of it." It's
Yeah.
just one of those things. When we had career day at school, the only aviation thing was either pilot or flight attendant. I had no
Hmm.
idea. And like I said, I really looked into it.
How was Japan?
It was amazing, beautiful. The best office I ever had, was looking over the ocean and
Wow.
watching planes land. But it opened my eyes to different cultures and how they live, and being able to travel from there. I went to Korea, and that was a great experience. And yeah, just the history that's out there, seeing, like I said, how the other side lives, and a lot of things I brought back to myself, certain like hand gestures or stuff that you may not think is rude, but over there it may be offensive or just something culturally personal space, things like that. So it was a lot of things I still maintain in my life now.
At an early age, experiencing other cultures, especially so far away from home, gives you a different perspective. And did that help you in your career, professional growth, seeing other cultures, meeting other people, different points of views, stuff like that?
Oh, absolutely. Even just when I was like in Camp Pendleton, in the Marine Corps, people are constantly like moving around. You're moving every 2 years, every 3 years if you have a family, and you're meeting people quickly in short periods of time. So knowing I'm not going to be able to be at every base, and knowing I'm not going to be stationed at every airfield, anytime I met somebody that was from a different airfield because it's different where you're at. The basic rules are the same, but there's different challenges. Like Pendleton, a lot of mountains. We were like in a canyon. So that might be different for someone who's stationed close to the water, or like in Okinawa, we're on an island.
Hmm.
So in when I would meet somebody from a different, I would say, how do you do this there? Or what's the challenges there? So that way I would use that. And then when I'm instructing, because I became an instructor, I would, people say, well, that doesn't happen. That's not, I was like, well, actually, if you go somewhere else, it is. It's something you should consider. It's the things you put in your tool belt.
Yeah, I was in the Air Force Station on Dover Air Force Base, and I put in to go to Italy and Korea and Japan. I never got a chance. They only sent me to the Middle East. But even there, within the military, you meet other people from across the U.S., different backgrounds, colors, shapes, and it gives you a well rounded perspective on other people and how to work well with other people. We have to work with other people. We have to be professionals, and that really solidifies a perspective that a lot of people don't have, right? After serving 5 years in the Marine Corps, you joined the FAA, as you mentioned, in November 2015. Can you walk us through the transition? How was it like moving from military air traffic control to the FAA?
Yeah, it was challenging and not in a way that I expected. When people talk about transitioning to civilian life, they often think about combat and war, and like it's just hard to adjust being. But it's not just that. It's everyone transitioning out of the military. In the military, they're telling you what to do, where to go, how you're going to get there, what you're going to wear, everything. You don't have to think about it. You just
Hmm.
obey orders. And now in the civilian world, you have to make all those decisions. And it's not that you don't know how to make a decision, but you're questioning like, oh, was this what they're intending? Is this the right one? And if you're not exposed to that, industry already, you're like, well, is this correct? Is this, like you have this sense of like, I have to report this. I have to, and when you're just on your own, it was hard. It was hard to know that I was doing the right thing. And, so when I got assigned to Evansville, that was my first FAA facility. There was the facility representative. So he's the person for the union that, speaks for people in that facility. We contacted each other and he told me, he was like, relax. I was like, well, I don't have, I haven't set up where I'm going to live yet. I haven't, I'm moving from this state. I'm looking for this. And he was like, relax, we have some options for you, where people have already lived stuff. I was just like, okay, and then he was like, and honestly, when you show up on your first day, he was like, I know it's going to be hard because you're a Marine. He was like, but you can dress comfortably. He was like, in my head, and I think my first 2 months, I wore polo and slacks, like it was just, he was like, it's okay to, you have a stressful job. He's like, it's okay to be comfortable, but it was just one of those things. You still have those standards, ingrained in you. The other part that was hard about transitioning was that it's no longer a lifestyle. Whereas in the military, even when you leave work, you're not really clocking out. You go back to the barracks and you're still around military people. You still have to follow military rules. You still have to, so you never, and especially when I was in Okinawa, that's on an island, so you never, even if you go out in town and you're doing something, you're never really leaving work, or it doesn't feel that way because you're always under, a microscope because you're part of the military. Whether you're in civilian clothes or not, people know, well,
Hmm.
you're American,
Your
you don't,
haircut has.
yeah, you stand out. So, you're just always, like I said, every little thing, so going to the civilian world and it not being like you just go to work and go home. It's kind of, you think it's going to be like, oh, that's so great. But it was kind of like, well, that's it. That's all, like I just go to work, go home. Like
Mhm.
what, we don't have to, mandatory bonding or,
Mhm.
just things like that. You're like, oh, well, what should, you kind of just, it's hard. You don't really know what to do with yourself at first, and some people, adjust more easily than others. But when you're just so used to being part of a team and now like that ends soon as, your shift ends, it's different.
It's interesting you say, we in the military, they tell you where to live, where you're going to eat, and all that stuff. And I got out in 2008, and I'm still questioning my decisions. Did I make the right decisions? Should I live in this community or this neighborhood? Should I buy this house or no? Should I rent instead? We didn't have a whole lot of choices back then, which is, still transitioning from that mentality.
And I think it's too, because like in the military, it's a team approach for mission
Mhm.
accomplishment, and everything you do affects others. But now in the civilian world, where I choose to live isn't going to affect anybody but me. But it's hard.
Right.
like, okay, did I make the right decision for everyone else?
Exactly. So, for moving from Phoenix to Indiana, how was that? Was it a culture shock? I know it's extremely cold up there. I don't know how cold it's in the winter in Phoenix, but how was that transition? The different people, their background up there.
Uh, Culturally, it was a bit of a shock. So when I transitioned to Indiana, I was actually coming out of North Carolina. I was living there for a bit, and which was already a culture shock in itself for me because of how green it was. It's not very green in Arizona, you know?
Hmm.
So when I got assigned Evansville, Indiana, my first question was, where's Indiana?
Hmm.
Where's that at? You
Yeah.
know? So I had to pull out a map and look. I was like, okay, that's where I'm going, and, I didn't really question why or what because I was used to just being assigned places, for the
Hmm.
military. So going there and kind of looking around, a lot of fields and, cornfields and stuff. And not gonna lie, the biggest thing I missed was Mexican food. There wasn't the kind that I was used to from
Hmm.
Arizona. But, other than that, culturally, it was a bit of a shock. The weather was different. It did snow there. I wasn't used to a lot of snow from Phoenix, so I will say the people in my facility, they did well in embracing me for my first snow and how to drive in it and be slow and be safe.
Hmm.
But on that, yeah, it looked different. I looked different from most people that were there.
Hmm.
That was something that, kind of stood out. But, you know, I for me being from Arizona, there's a lot of mountains like in the skyline. So I remember going other places and thinking, where's all the mountains? I thought everywhere you went, I was born and raised in Phoenix and I think the first time I traveled out of the state, I was 15 or 16. And then at 18 I joined the Marines and then went everywhere. But so for me it was like, where's the mountains or why does it feel in Arizona, the sky's just wide open, So when
Hmm.
anytime there's trees, I feel like kind of like sunk in, So, but other than that, like, yeah, and there's greenery and stuff. That was nice to see.
It's funny. My kids, they were born and raised in Florida. The only mountains we have is the where you throw the trash, the mountain trash. But we took a trip to North Carolina and they saw mountains and they're like, "Is that AI generated or something?" They'd never seen mountains before, so they were super hiking and waterfalls and stuff like that, and they loved it. And a lot of people that will see this podcast will be a lot of the students, right? And the message here is not to be afraid of moving somewhere else, somewhere new, getting away from your family and stuff like that. It's a little scary at the beginning, but it would help you grow as a person and professionally, just being around other people and other cultures and stuff like that. In addition to working as a controller, you've taken a leadership role within the aviation workforce. You served 4 years as a FAC rep, a facility representative for NATCA, and now also serving again in Arizona in that role. Can you explain what the facility representative role involves and why is it important to you?
Yeah. So for me, as I described the transition, it not being a lifestyle anymore, I like helping people. I like helping out. If I see someone struggling, I'm gonna help out, or even maybe not struggling, just like, hey, just so you know, I had a hard time with this, but this is what helped me. I just naturally do that. I'm the oldest of four, so that's probably why, but so when I was in Evansville with the lifestyle transition, a lot of things that I was kind of missing, like I said, it's not the same as the military. It was the camaraderie. And it was kind of like that's what I missed about Marine Corps. The Marine Corps and military in general has a lot of stuff that, we're not fans of,
Mhm.
but I miss the people. I miss that no matter how bad it got or we were doing something we didn't want to do, we had each other and we all
Mhm.
kind of just shared the burden. And it's not quite like that in the civilian world, or I thought it wasn't. But then when I found the union, or they talk to me about the union and stuff. I'm just like, okay, like you hear about it and you think of like steel workers or some big like the police unions and stuff you see on TV. And I'm just like, okay, But then I went through some tough times in Evansville, like a lot, like I said, a lot of lifestyle changes, getting out of the military, the culture shock, not really having family around me. I'm a big family person, and I went through a divorce, so all those things kind of compiled, and I felt alone, and it affected my career, affected how I operated, and ultimately, it just wasn't the place for me anymore. So when I transitioned to Columbus, Georgia, I started getting a little bit more involved in the union and kind of seeing like there is a network out there for me.
Hmm.
And it's not just for me, it's for everyone. And this is how you help people. And so being very vocal in my facility got me elected. And that's how you choose the facility representative is it's an election amongst your peers. And so as I was helping people with things that I had struggled with, as I noticed it in other people, they're like, have you ever thought of being the rep? And I
Hmm.
was like, no, not really. Like it wasn't something that I aspired to do or anything like that. But they're like, well, you know a lot. People, they're always asking for help. They're like, if you were the rep, you would have the tools and the resources to help. So they elected me, and it was history after that. I started going to more events and trainings. The big thing was training. I started going to a lot of, whether it was secretary treasurer training to figure out how to do our finances, rep training, which it goes over our contract and all of our rights. That was a big thing, right, from the military too. I didn't have no rights, and so
Right.
you get to the civilian world and, like I said, we have a union, we have a contract that spells out like what protections you have. And it was like, wow, like
Mhm.
going to Columbus, it was a lot of military, or prior military service people, Army and I was the only Marine, I usually am, but Army and Air Force. So it's kind of hard when you watch people, you know, get told to do something that may not be correct, but they just do it because it's that sense, that instant willing obedience, they just
Mhm.
and then it's also, well, this isn't the worst thing I've ever done, and you got to tell them like, hey, you have rights. We got a whole book of them,
Mhm.
So like trying to educate people on their rights. And that was the biggest thing that I learned was people don't know what they don't know. And you're your biggest advocate. So if you don't know what your rights are, how do you know they're being violated?
Mhm.
And so I just really took a deep dive into that role and just helped try to educate people on what was going on and how processes should work. Because that's what that contract's full of processes. Like it's not saying, it's not a get out of jail free card. It's none of that. Unions sometimes have a bad rap for that, but no, it's protecting the process. We outlined a process, and the contract is a agreement between the agency and the union. Like they've already agreed to that.
Hmm.
So this is what was laid out for us. This is what we're going to follow. So I did that for 4. I just kept getting reelected, so, and I really enjoyed it. That was my camaraderie that I was missing from the military was like, okay, like I just want to help take care of people. If I struggle with something, I don't want somebody to struggle with that same issue. What's the point? We already know what the solution is. So if we can start from that point, how much further can we go? So I, just helped, and that's when, I had people will say it's a thankless job because it is. It's a volunteer organization, much like our organization. You don't do it for the accolades, you don't do it for the thanks, and people say it's a thankless job, it's a thankless job, and I may have subscribed to that at one point, but I thought about it and I was like, it's not. I get plenty of thanks, and not just from the people I'm helping, but from their families, um their spouses. I remember getting stopped in a store one time. I ran into my coworker's spouse, and she said, "Hey, I just want to thank you. Like my husband comes home happier. He tells me about how much his work life has changed since you became the rep. Because he was struggling with whatever it was before." She was like, "So just it makes our lives better because I didn't like seeing him miserable. I didn't like seeing him being taken advantage of or not knowing that there was help out there." So, and it's things like that that, keep me going.
Yeah, and that means the whole world, right? Because you have different cups to fill, and helping others fill one of those cups. And I was the national reps in Region X, and I didn't know the contract before I became a rep. I didn't even read it. And then I started like getting more involved and seeing how of a family NACA is and the support that they give everyone. And I just shared it with everyone in the office. And absolutely, there's a lot of training out there. There's a lot of camaraderie and family sense in the union once you get involved, right? What's uh, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of students will be seeing our podcast. What's a advice you would give to a student if they're interested in becoming an air traffic controller?
Go for it. Just
Mhm.
do it. Try it. If you know air traffic control is, you're already ahead of the game, but just go for it. Try it for it. There's multiple avenues to get involved. I went through the military. Does everybody have to go through the military? No, but if you're going to have a plan, absolutely have a plan. The military is going to get out of you what they set forth to get out of you. So you make them work for you and what you want and train you. For me, coming from the Marine Corps, I didn't have to go to the schoolhouse in OKC. I went directly to my facility and started training. The advantages of that is seniority. My seniority started the day I walked in. So, from someone who got hired the same time as me, they had to go through Oklahoma City schoolhouse and then get to their facility. I went straight to the facility. So that's, months ahead of them. I already had an idea, and, my training in the Marine Corps helped me, and I just had to adjust it. Like I said earlier, each facility has its different challenges. The basic rules may be the same, but I now have to find what are the things here that, maybe, oceanic procedures. I didn't have to do that in Evansville, Indiana,
Mhm.
so, but the mountainous terrain and, whatever else I did. Adjusting to that, but I already, like I said, had a foundation. Now, if there's a CTI, which is through school, getting a degree in air traffic, there's those routes. There's different schools and different programs, and then you can go through there. There's also what we call off the street, which is no experience. You have to have some work experience and a high school diploma, but they'll pay you to train you, and you go through there. And even if it doesn't work out, there's so much more that air traffic training can break off into. Any type of dispatching, there's people that even not necessarily that they demic, but they just want to try something different. So they train dispatching. That's a big one that people don't really think about. So yeah, there's plenty of opportunities out there, and there's nothing in just trying. Part of me wanting to get involved in DACA and our organization is putting the idea out there of air traffic control. Because like I said, I didn't know what it was. I 100% lucked out into this, but I want everybody else to know. So
Right.
anytime I'm at the dentist getting my teeth cleaned or whatever, I'm talking to the hygienist, and she was like, "Oh, my son doesn't know what to do. He's 18." I was like, "Has he thought about air traffic control?" Like, has he
Yeah.
thought about, and just like letting people know. My nieces and nephews, people, cousins going to schools and stuff, just saying like, "Hey, this is a job out there. Not, it's not just pilot and flight attendants."
Mhm.
So I'd suggest anybody that wants to get involved, just go out there, try it. There's plenty of information out there. You just got to know to look for it.
Well, Ariel, thank you so much for sharing your journey and giving us insight into the important work of aviation professionals and what they do every day to keep our national airspace system safe and efficient. For our listeners, if today's conversation inspired you to explore more careers in aviation, consider connecting with the National Hispanic Coalition for Aviation Excellence to learn more about mentorship, scholarships, and opportunities in aviation. Visit our website, www.nhcfae.org, to learn more. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode of the National Hispanic Coalition for Aviation Excellence Career Series podcast. Thank you, Ariel.
Thank you.